What's up everyone on the internet? Thank you for making this video part today. I am so excited because in keeping up with this year's theme, I figured, you know what? Since we're talking about vampire movies, why not talk about the very first vampire movie ever made, Nosferatu. So this probably may be the oldest movie I've ever done a review for, because when you realize that this film came out back in 1922, that makes it over 100 years old now. And here's how you know how old this movie is. Because there is no spoken dialogue in this film. Wait, what? But before we get into that, like I said, this movie came out back in 1922 and originated from Germany, where the title actually translates to Nosferatu, a Symphony of Horror. Pretty good title if you ask me, considering how from beginning to end, this is basically an organ concert. But like I said, this movie originated from Germany, and the way I found out about this was because of the version that I watched on YouTube was actually written in German, which set my heart in a panic mode as I was frantically searching for an English version. Didn't take long until I found the right one, and as I was watching the opening sequence, oh my god, I was captivated by the music. More on that later. Anyway, going into this movie, one could say that it is very similar to Bram Stoker's Dracula, considering how both stories share similar elements. I mean, we have a real estate guy visiting a wealthy lord who lives in a castle and is not creepy at all, only to find out that he's a vampire and is trying to steal his wife. But from what I read, because the filmmakers didn't own the rights to the book, in order to avoid copyright, they decided to change several character names. So instead of Count Dracula, we actually have Count Orlok. Well, this came back to bite them, no pun intended, years later. Some of Bram Stoker's heirs actually sued the filmmakers and destroyed most of the copies, except for very few that actually survived. That's pretty crazy if you ask me, considering how in today's world, if YouTube flags you down for copyright, they just remove your video. Now imagine not only that happening, but also a group of angry people coming over to your house and destroying all your devices in order to make sure that you do not release that video. That's pretty insane. Thankfully, the whole drama blew over as years went on, and thankfully so, because this film surprisingly holds up. With that being said, let's finally talk about this film. So I mentioned how this film is basically an adaptation of the novel Dracula with just several character names changed. But from the beginning, you get a sense of how this movie is going to feel based on how there is no dialogue at all. Now, what I mean by that is because technology wasn't there at the time, and because this was a low-budget horror film, capturing sound from your actors was extremely difficult. So in order to inform audiences of what was happening in the scene, you would have your actors mouth off their words, only to later cut to a flashcard that would show what was being spoken. And this basically forces you to pay attention, because if you look away at any moment, you may miss important information that is crucial to the story. But as you get further and further into the story, you start to see that this movie almost feels like you're reading a book, more specifically Dracula. And even though this film is over 100 years old, it still gives you an unsettling feeling. Now, to most of us, me included, whenever we think of Nosferatu, we instantly go to SpongeBob, who did that famous joke back in the 2000s. And while I really love that joke, a lot of people forget that the character Count Orlok is super creepy. And I don't know who designed the character, but they did a very good job making a vampire look so unsettling, because by making him bald, have pointy ears, and extremely long fingers, I would not want to run to that guy in a dark alley. Even the way he moves is also unsettling, because by having him hunched over with his fingers stretched out, it makes you want to turn around to make sure that no one is behind you. Now when you add the music, woof, talk about chills. Which brings me back to what I mentioned earlier, and that is the music is top tier. I mean, if the only sound you're gonna be hearing from this movie is gonna be coming from your soundtrack, you gotta make sure that the music is firing off on all cylinders. And from the beginning, you are immediately captivated by the sound of organ pipes ringing in your ears. That really does bring life into this story, as the music clearly determines where you're at, what emotions are being felt, and why the scene is urgent. Not gonna lie, I've always been fascinated by the organ ever since I heard Davy Jones' theme from Pirates of the Caribbean. And I remember back during the pandemic, I went down a rabbit hole and looked up a lot of organ music. And one of my favorite videos is Bloody Tears on Strahd's organ. And holy crap, if you want to listen to vampire music, I highly recommend you check out that song, as it makes your heart ache and sink in pain as you feel Dracula's emotions being expressed on the organ. That may be the weirdest pitch I've ever made to a song, but it's what came to mind as I was listening to the music throughout the entire film. So I'll put a link in the description down below in case you want to listen to that piece of music. But like I said, the music in this film is on a whole nother level, and it made me realize that if you're into music, this is probably one of those films that you should check out because it really does show you how the power of music can have a huge influence on how a story is being told. So overall, I enjoyed this movie as it really does hold up even after 100 years, and it pretty much sparked the interest of vampire films. With that being said, I just found out that apparently A24 is looking to remake this film with Robert Eggers directing and Bill Skarsgård starring. Wait, let me get this straight. The guy who made The Northman and The Lighthouse, two of my most favorite movies, is going to be directing this film, and the guy who played Pennywise is going to be Count Orlok? Sign me up! So it looks like this movie is set to be released somewhere in 2024. I am very excited considering how I really enjoy this movie and cannot wait to see how they handle this remake. But anyway, if you're into vampire movies or if you're really into music, I highly recommend you watch this film as it really is a keystone in cinematic history. Well, that's gonna do it for this video, guys. That was my overall review on Nosferatu.